in Sydney, Australia. And she has over 20 years of experience in platelet biology, sorry, and she has made groundbreaking discoveries in platelet clearance mechanisms. And beyond her great scientific contributions, she's also a passionate advocate for science communication and early researcher development. And so we're very honored to have her here today to share her expertise and insights with us. So whenever you're ready, Dr. van der Wal, we can get started.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me. Welcome, everyone. It's in the morning here in Australia, so bear with me. But I just had my coffee, so I'm fully awake. So this talk is about how to communicate science better. And there's a few little nuggets in here, I hope, to improve your science communication. It's more than you think. So, let's see. Yes, so this is me in a nutshell. So I was introduced as a platelet biologist. So I live in Sydney, Australia. So that's why I've got this nice koala sitting on my shoulder. Among my other favorite things, platelets, stored platelets, and platelets over here as well. To the right, there's a picture of me. Yeah, I would say this captures me completely. This is me among some Dutch cheeses because I'm actually from the Netherlands. And I'm among my favorite things I'm actually working on, which are specific sugars on cells, also called glycans. But I won't talk about that today. So back to science and communication. Why is it actually important? It's more important than you think. It can educate the public to make informed decisions. It can make science more transparent, also with government funds. It can address urgent issues like previous pandemics, for instance, or even future pandemics. In future, inform, educate companies and also educate decision makers. So I will start off describing my time when I was social media editor at JTH, or the Journal of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. So this is some data I want to share with you. So why use social media for science communication? So I think it's very important to promote your research and your niche field you're working in. Especially these days, it's very crucial to counteract all the fake science that's out there. It enhances networking among colleagues, it promotes research within the field and beyond, and you can also hear about new papers in the field or beyond. And as I mentioned before, you can even educate the funders, public, patients, and other people who are interested. So social media is constantly in evolution. So when we started the JGA social media platforms, it was on Twitter, which was a great platform for sharing science. We grew quite a bit. But then in the end, it changed into X, which is a bit of a completely different platform. And yeah, a lot of people have moved away from X. I should mention there's huge growth on the LinkedIn platforms related to JGH and the ISTH as well. Some people are even on Blue Sky, and I'm sure there's other platforms out there. I also want to mention, apart from social media, you can be involved in podcasts. The Platelet Society, for instance, is very active in doing those. There's also, I think, also ISTH podcasts now and webinars. And you can even share your science on TikTok. My former platelets colleague, Beth Webb, has got an amazing website with some great inspiration. So back to social media on LinkedIn. Is LinkedIn even active? Yes, it's grown quite a bit. But some scientists are flocking to Substack, which is another platform I'm not familiar with. But if you want to know more about how to use LinkedIn for your career or for research, look into Karen Tisdale. She's the LinkedIn guru, I would say. Some statistics, you might say LinkedIn is a very boring platform. and it's basically only your CV. Well, yes and no. It actually is very powerful. So this is an example I want to show for myself. So I just published this book chapter on the amazing playlist. I wrote a little summary about that, and I was really impressed that it got like 5,000 impressions, which I feel is quite a lot for this very niche topic. So you can broadcast your science or someone else's science as well, or whatever you like to share. So types of content can vary quite a bit. You can make beautiful cartoons. As I said, you can share other people's research with some nice photos. You can have short summaries, important graphs. Make sure it's really short and make sure the message really comes across. And yeah, back when I was at JTH, yeah, we were doing really well. We were highlighting female scientists and other underrepresented research and researchers as well. But yeah, this is still changing to this day. One thing I want to mention, there's a correlation between the citations of research papers and social media scores. And again, this keeps changing, but you can see it's clearly related to one another. There's a huge spike in citations and there's a huge spike in social media and vice versa. So this is definitely correlated with one another. This is more data on Twitter back in the day about mentions on Twitter and the downloads of papers, and that was also correlated with one another. This is 2022 data from 20 most downloaded papers, and you can see it is correlated with one another and also related to high audiometric scores. Some more Twitter stats, I won't go through all of this, but I'm just going to show you that this is variable over the years and it keeps changing, but it keeps growing as well, and it leads to profile visits of certain websites, in this case the JTH website. So that is also linked to one another. And please check out this paper I published with my fellow social media editor Mayan Chong in this editorial back in 2023. And some more statistics, again, this is from 2023. I'm curious what it is now, but from a cohort of 114 readers of JTH and the other ICTH journal RPTH, the community seems very active on the different platforms. So keep that in mind. You will be able to connect with different researchers through those platforms. So as mentioned, our community is still very active, but social media keeps changing, but it's still, I think, very important to share your work, but share it well. It will create more exposure for you and your work, and it creates higher visibility even during congresses or other events. Some tips and tricks I want to share. So how to best use it. It's usually best to use the trending hashtags, especially during congresses, because that makes you more visible. And don't just share your paper or whatever you want to share with this title, because no one really understands it. People want to know, what is the impact of this research and what does it actually mean? What is the main message? Why does it matter? And as I said, it's crucial to highlight underrepresented research and researchers, and include journal handles as well, if appropriate, or names of fellow co-authors of groups for more exposure. So this is for more data from that same editorial. So as I mentioned, LinkedIn was investigated back in the day. And as you can see in this left graph here, you can see there's a huge representation of North America, which also includes Canada and Europe, although all the other countries here are not really well represented. And I think this really needs to change, so we can all play our part in this. It's still very powerful. So this is some data from 2023. It was like sometimes even 6,000 reactions or more than 500 reposts. But currently the JTH LinkedIn has 6,000 followers, which is quite a lot. So now back to how to best communicate your science. So it's very important to know your audience, know your why, and tell a good story. This is more important than you realize. So who is actually your audience? So it could be different audiences you're targeting. So one obvious one might be reviewers of scientific papers. And the question is this a very specific paper, a journal, or more general journal like Nature, for instance? But obviously there's also grant reviewers, other reviewers out there who can be your audience. You could write for a website university, which could be read by students or colleagues, or international colleagues as well. As I mentioned already, social media, but also patients, potentially the public, and potential funders. So a lot has been said about the so-called lay language, and a lot of people still don't realize what that means and how important that actually is. It's really underrepresented and it's got a very bad rep for some reason. So lay language is usually defined with this so-called flash Kincaid grade level. So you can see scores here from 0 to 18, a little bit in the middle average grade, so 8 grades. You should be aiming for if you're writing a lay language piece. So that means it can be understood by a variety of audiences. So everyone will understand this. 80% of Americans here, but globally, I would say. So these are some titles from research, research articles online and media stories. So I always have to think about the media and how your work comes across. So you can imagine if you look at all those titles here, some look more interesting than others for various reasons. And obviously the middle one about the tiger shark eating this Australian animal, echidna here at the bottom, of course, that's sparks a lot of conversation. And of course, everyone is interested in reading that and we want to know more about that. So there's some other titles here, which some are better than others, but it's very important to, make sure that the audience is excited to read your article or text. So I looked through some research papers talking about science communications. There's a whole variety out there, but there are a few basics that everyone is agreeing with. So this is from 2023. And some basics to remember is especially do use simple sentences, do use positive phrasing and active voice, include the why, what, and why your research matters, or something else you want to put out there. Have it reviewed by a colleague or friend outside of the field. Use a graphical abstract or cartoon. Don't use jargon or acronyms. No one will remember what they are. Don't use big words to sound interesting. People won't remember if they can't follow, they just are not interested anymore. And don't use complex graphics. Another paper again talked about science in plain language. So I would say that's a little bit like the lay language I just talked about. Here are some examples of language that you should be using to make it more accessible to everyone. So words like hypoxia, people won't have a clue what that means. You should say a lack of oxygen, everyone will know what that means. And same for these medical terms like comorbidities. It's better to say something along the health problems that happen more often in certain people with certain diseases. This at least people will know what you're talking about. Use an active voice and use, instead of adverse effects, for instance, it's better to call it side effects. Then people will know what that means. This is another thing I want to share. So apparently you have only 15 seconds to grab a reader's attention, which basically comes down to 60 words. So that is not a lot. So have a think about that. Also, when you publish an article, whatever that is about, typically there's only 60 seconds, if you're lucky, that people spend reading your article. So this really shows that, yeah, you have to grab their attention and you have to know what it's about and what you're trying to sell and what you'd actually want to explain. So it's not about dumbing down, which a lot of people actually think what lay language is, science communication. No, that's not what it is about. It is about being seen and changing people's minds and making research accessible to a broader audience. So this is, I had a media training workshop when I was still at Lifeblood R&D, and they told us a very interesting difference between science and media stories. So if you look at the media to the right, they usually start with results and conclusions, how you got there, and then a little bit of backgrounds and how this all came about. Science is usually the opposite of that. So you usually start with a background and context, then methods, and then results and conclusions. So I guess you see how different those two things are. But for better science communication, it's probably good to learn from how the media works and use the right pyramids, I would say. So it's very important to make your story understandable, relatable to people, and memorable. So for instance, this one in the middle here is a donut with various toppings. This was actually used to explain the ABO blood groups. It sounds, yeah, very childish, but everyone remembered this and everyone was was aware how these blood groups are working and how important they are. Another example I want to share, which is not presented, but I once showed a video of sheep running through a street in New Zealand, and these sheep were all coming together, and I immediately had to think about a plate of cloth. So I always say platelets are like sheep, and some people still remembering that when I was presenting that in a Pint of Science talk in a pub somewhere. So yeah, how do you write an article or a little text about your research? So this is a title that is probably very attractive. It's easy to know what it's about. It's understandable. So research finds Australian blood types not so bleeding obvious. There's a pun as well. So people usually like that. So this is a really great title that can be used for media, messages in the media. So it's also important to have a lead, which is a very short summary of the main message, then a brief background and why it matters, and make it personal. Put some people in the story or patients, provide some details and why the work was done. Now back to research papers and how to improve them, because they're very linked to science communication. I mean, it is science communication, but at the highest level. So this is a very interesting paper I came across, that apparently the readability of scientific text, including papers, is decreasing over time, which was unexpected. So they investigated 123 different journals and more than 700,000 abstracts. You can clearly see the readability is going down over time here, and it's very low where we are now. So that is not great, especially in a time where it's really crucial to have understandable research messages out there. I also want to mention this. So this was published by the former editor-in-chief of RBTH, Mary Kushner. Again, it sounds like something that is not important to us, but she published this editorial about search engine optimization, or SEO. Why is this important and what can we learn from this? So, according to her and the CEO guidelines, the first 60 words of the research paper title, I think any title, are very crucial. And especially the first two sentences are the most important. And this makes your work easier to find online. So that is something to think about as well, especially when you publish a paper, but this could also work for other articles if they are online. And of course, you want your work to be found, so this is more important than we previously realized. Now, these days, we are in the times of using AI, and there's been lots of debate about this. Can you use it ethically? Can you use it if you have a writer's block? And we all have been there. And how should we be using it? How can you use it? I'm just going to show some examples of potential applications. So there is this paper that was just published on an Australian website called The Conversation. There's some interesting science communication articles on there. And this was about how simple science summaries written by AI can actually help people understand research and trust scientists. These are some articles published on the Nature website. And as I said, the community, research community, is actually split on why, on if we actually should be using AI to write science papers. And this was another paper which actually says it can be used for science communication. I think the time will, in time, we will have better guidelines on how to best use these platforms, but I'm just going to show some examples. So this paper came across, I found this paper, it's about complexity to clarity. So here they used AI to change the perception of scientists and the public's understanding. And what they actually did was they used AI and used the following prompts when they were summarizing research articles. So they would use prompts like this, like the following text is an academic abstract from etc., etc. Create a significance statement, explain significance, make it understandable to an undergraduate educated scientist and outside their field of specialty. You can do something similar if you've got an abstract written suitable for a Congress and use Copilot, for instance, and ask for these things and see just what comes up, just for inspiration, and see what wording they would use. So you would be surprised and it would give you some insights. Now, something else I want to point out. So science communication can also be linked to you if you are a researcher and if you are very interested in this topic, and I think you should as researchers. But it can also be used to create your brand. And your brand is you. So this is something I just want to put out there. You can potentially also build personal websites. And there's been an increase in these websites. This is a Nature article about tips and tricks. There's different guidelines how to best do that. And why would you do that to begin with? So you can use it to explain your research to colleagues, public patients, future students, or outreach in general. Remember that scientists are human too. And it's actually a more detailed version than LinkedIn. LinkedIn sometimes is still more like a CV, and you really have to scroll through everything to find everything about a person. But if you have a website, everything is there along with some other resources. It's more personal than a university page. You can potentially use it to share your story and what you want to share. Of course, you can use it to share lab photos or experimental photos, explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you can share resources, maybe blogs or videos or open access papers or whatever you want to share. Here's some examples. I actually got a website myself. I think a lot of you already looked at that, so thank you. There's some great website here from Beth Webb as well. She's done great things for science communication. And there's a lot of resources you can use. You have to pay an annual fee though, but some are cheaper than others. But I think it's still worth it. So there's some other resources here as well. So some books here, What is Next for Science Communication, Directions, Lingering Distractions, The Science of Science Communication, Then We Such a Scientist, and Made to Stick. So they all are here for you to read. I didn't realize this presentation was a bit shorter than I realized. It gives us more time for a discussion. I want to acknowledge, the JJ's journal again and my former colleague, social media editor, Leanne Chow. She's still there, together with Joy and the editors-in-chiefs and the former editors-in-chiefs, the ICH marketing team as well, and Alison Gould, which I learned a lot from when I was at the Australian Lifeblood R&D, and I also reused some of his slides. So I want to thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting presentation. And I haven't really personally, I haven't heard anyone talk about science communication or anything. So this was my first time and it was very interesting. So I'm gonna, okay, so Dr. Othman has a question. So,
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Diane. This is amazing. And for our trainees and students, I think this is eye-opening at many different levels. In fact, I also find a lot of new information that I didn't know about. So I appreciate that. I guess I have a couple of questions. The first is, where do you see us going in the next 5 or 10 years? That's more of an imaginary question. You've been in this field for some time. You've used it in science. You've used the social media editor job. Like, how do you think, or how is the scientific communication will change in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, it is a dynamic process. I think, by looking into all those AI related articles, I think AI should be used more and more, especially if we're all time poor, and we all are. So we can learn a lot from that, especially by using prompts like, is this text suitable for this and these audiences? And you would be surprised what the answers are. So I think that will be a major development, but we should be using it well and ethically. I also think it really depends on you, what you're comfortable with. I'm not a TikTok person, so I will never make videos. But if you're interested in doing that, for the younger generation, and maybe Vera can say something about that. I think that is probably even more appealing than reading dry text or reading blogs and text at all. But there's a lot of podcasts as well. I'm listening to more and more podcasts, which sometimes have a personal story about the researcher as well. I think that is very important also for the public, because there's still a lot of there's even more mistrust, I think, in science than ever. But we have to play our part. I think as researchers we have to keep fighting this. And I know it's not easy, but we have to keep sharing our message and our research. And as I said, I'm hoping this would be evolving, and more researchers will share their research in an understandable way. More researchers will share their research in a better way amongst colleagues as well. Also at congresses and abstracts and yeah, so that should happen, and people will need more training as well, I think, because sometimes, yeah, it's better not to share your research if you're doing this poorly. So it's better to know what you're doing. Also with social media, it's great to have these platforms to be active, but you have to maintain them as well, maintain them well. Otherwise, you do more damage than good if you just have your platform and it's very outdated. So that's something you need. You need to commit yourself to a platform if you want to. And yeah, I also moved away from X, but I actually feel maybe we should move back in because there's a lot of negativity. And yeah, where's the balance now? The balance is now completely gone. But yeah, maybe Vera can let us know what the younger generation is using. Um,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we're just using maybe more, well, I say I can't speak for my whole generation, but I think most of people in my generation have a shorter attention span. I think that's what's kind of, I think there's even research about it that like our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So before people would watch movies and TV shows, and now that's why there's an appeal for Instagram or TikTok, the TikToks or the Reels, because it's short videos and people are just more likely to engage with those with their attention span. But yeah, but I think a lot of people use X as well. And just, I think social media platforms in general are used a lot. But yeah. And also, if I had a question, so you mentioned that the readers, you kind of had 60 seconds to grab a reader's attention when you have a paper. So in the first two sentences, so I was wondering what those 60 words should focus on, or those first two sentences, if you have any tips to kind of grab the reader's attention, and what best information you should select from your paper or from what you're presenting to be most effective.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. There's not an easy answer, but I think if you are in medical research, and I think many of us are, I think it's really important to basically explain what you're working on, like in terms of disease, explain the disease instead of this, yeah, for instance, immune thrombocytopenia, that's already borderline. What does that even mean? So explain why that is important and add numbers, maybe also for cardiovascular disease, maybe state how many deaths are due to cardiac diseases annually. Statistics like that can be very powerful. And also that it's a life-threatening disease. Those words everyone will understand, but it needs to be backed up with science, I think. So if you just say, oh, this is very important because it is important, then yeah, I mean, no one really cares. But explain why patients are suffering, what is lacking, are the current treatments working or not, are the side effects really severe, are they very expensive? There could be a whole list of reasons why you're doing certain research. It could still be on protein A, B, or C, but in order to explain what that protein is, you have to explain the full picture, that you're actually a small cog in basically changing the lives of these patients. It sounds very big, but that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically like convey significance, but in a simple way that's
Yes,
readable.
yeah. Yeah, and I've reviewed many papers, I've seen many abstracts. Some are so full with jargon and medical terms and acronyms and abbreviations, and I'm completely lost and have no interest in reading further. So yeah, please don't do that. Just yeah, state the importance, and even the title is very important as well, which I didn't even know either. We all keep learning, and there's all this knowledge apparently which helps all of us. But grab people's attention. Like also, I worked in the glycan field, which are yeah like the carbohydrates and cells. But even like our community, do they know what glycans are? do they care? So you just have to explain that it might be a new language, similar to DNA or RNA, the code of life. I've seen those phrases. It sounds very big, but yeah, they're very related in a way, and maybe that sounds more exciting.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, Diane, maybe I should ask you on scientific publications. We all suffer nowadays more rejection than not. And I see a lot of disc rejections. Papers don't even go to reviewers. That's one problem. The other problem is finding reviewers to actually review the associate editor or, senior editor. It's hard to find reviewers. So I wonder if you
Yes.
can comment on each of those. How to
I
avoid loss of
think, but
rejection.
yeah, it's actually great comments. Yeah, so when I was editor myself, I mean, as an early career back then or mid-career, I always made sure that those people were also included in the reviewer database. But sometimes it wasn't always easy. Not everyone agrees with that. Luckily, there's now movements towards including those people as well, because they usually have more time as well and they're more interested, and they probably write better reviews because they spend a lot of time on it. So I would recommend looking for those people, because they are very keen, and sometimes they complained to us that they were never asked to review. I was like, well, we need more reviewers, and then so that's one thing. Another thing maybe is also about the language that is used. If no one understands what the paper is about or the importance, yeah, maybe the editor will desk reject because they don't understand it. I mean, that makes sense in a way. I'm not saying it is the reason, but it could be one of the reasons.
Right.
And we all assume in this field that everyone knows everything about thrombosis and hemostasis, but the editors, they don't know everything either. So you need to really guide them through your research and why is this novel and why is this done to begin with.
Right. It's the storytelling that you were
Yes,
talking
I
about.
think that's what it is about.
Mhm.
But yeah, as I said, we still have a long way to go. I came from far, to be honest. A long time ago, I learned a lot from our communication advisor in industry back then. Before that, I was like all of us, just writing very hardcore scientific text that probably no one understood. Even when I talked about cold storage of playlists, I never explained why that was done and what is the problem to begin with, and why are people even doing that. So it's yeah. The thing is, it's really hard to change the dogma because, as I said, a lot of people don't necessarily agree with using lay language. That they feel they are more important. As I said, sometimes they think it's dumbing down the language,
Right.
which sometimes that's how it feels like, but it should not feel like that. I think, yeah, it really depends on your audience as well. I think keep your audience in mind. You can't please everyone with one text. So, and some people might think, oh, this is very simple. Then, yeah, so it depends what you want to, what is the message and whom is your main audience, or write different pieces for different audiences. But of course, that is more work as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And also, I had another question. So I was wondering, when you deliver a presentation, so about, for example, because I know a lot of people kind of struggle with this from what I've heard. So when you have like a presentation, a scientific presentation on some work you're doing or research or something like that, so how do you have any tips for how to best choose which information you need to keep and kind of what to cut out? Because I know that a lot of time we like write a lot and then we just have a lot of information, but we can't keep everything. So how do you kind of what information, how do we choose it to, to have like the most significant and best storytelling kind of?
That is a fantastic question. I didn't even have time to talk about presentations. And to be honest, my slides were not the best for presentation, but if I would present at a Congress, I've heard from, again, from the science communication experts that there are certain rules to follow. Don't make the slides too busy, and a lot of people are still doing that, and they say, oh, it's a busy slide, and I keep going. It's like, oh, that is, I would say, mistake number one. You don't have to show off with more data. Less is more. So just choose one graph, enlarge it on the entire slide, or have like fly them in with an animation and show two graphs in one slide, not at the same time, and use arrows and things like that, and have a maximum of, I think, 5 bullet points of text with very short statements. Don't have entire sentences on there. Apparently someone investigated that there should be also a maximum number of words and a maximum font. Use large font as well. And cartoons, don't use slides with only text. And basically, yeah, everything you put on a slide should have a meaning, should have a reason why it actually sits there. So I always made an effort in showing less on the slide and have a story. So, you know, it also makes it easier for yourself. So you know what's coming, and link slides with each other. So I have like a bridge between slides. And have an overview at the end of your conclusions. That will really help. Some people have an introduction of what they're going to present. That might be useful, but conclusion is very important at the end. To have like a summary, and even better, a summary cartoon. I mean, visually, we are all very visual people. So make it as visual as possible. And I don't mean hundreds and hundreds of proteins interacting with one another. I've seen those slides as well, but only show what you've worked on, not more. Or make your own cartoon. That's what I would recommend. And use, yeah, there's also specific colors you should be using. Be mindful of colorblind people. There's guidelines about that as well. So you can't actually use red and green. Apparently, those colors are not great to use. So use magenta, and some other colors. If you look into that, you'll find a lot of information about that as well.
Okay,
It could be a presentation by itself, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know, for me also it's hard, I feel like, to do presentations, and I think I do put too much text on slides and things like that. So yeah, I think it needs to be more careful. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we all keep learning. I'm still learning as well. When I started off, I looked at slides from my PhD. They were very ugly. They were blue, I might remember, and yellow text. It was really horrible. But that's how it was done a long time ago, and with all these very complicated graphs. And I was completely lost in my own story, especially when I got started. So yeah, you should really own your story, and make the slides work for you. Some people say you are the presenter, and the slides are just an accessory. Yeah, well, that's something to think about. It's not always possible if you're behind a desk somewhere. But yeah, try to use body language and point to the slides. But that's another challenge. Not always easy. And don't read. Don't read. A lot of people read the scripts. Yeah, I know why that is done. I did it myself a long time ago, but it doesn't make your presentation better. It's always, we all make mistakes. I think it is better personally to have a spontaneous story and practice your slides to know what is coming. And have a more spontaneous presentation than have the scripted talk, what is actually read in front of the audience. That doesn't sound great at all. But it's a good way to start and then make your story about that. And it should be a bit of a balance, not an easy one. I think it's practice, practice, practice. That's yeah.
I feel
Until we're comfortable with our story.
right. I do feel scientific communication should be taught in the
Yes.
undergrad years, and even how to put a PowerPoint presentation together. We always expect students to do that. We never teach them
Yes.
the skills or the way of, when you start, how to do that.
Mhm.
So to
Yes, I
me,
agree. Yeah.
putting a PowerPoint together is three elements. Number one is constructing the slides themselves and how they look. And as you mentioned, the text, the ratio, the illustration, the flow even of ideas, the storytelling, that's one aspect. The second is, of course, you making a connection with the audience by the style of presentation. And as you said it very beautifully, it's you and the slides are an aid. It should be like that. And then the third thing is how to handle questions at the end, because that's what you leave the audience with after you leave
Yes. Yeah.
the scenery. So we never teach people systematically of how to do that and practice it. I do it, to a degree with my mentees because and that requires time. Like to do a one-on-one,
Yeah. Yeah.
it does take time, but that I feel what should be done.
I cannot agree more. Yeah, I think this is really underrepresented throughout university and throughout all of us really. Yeah, I think yeah it. I even saw some TED Talks style presentations by people, and that seems very difficult and really next level. But I think those types of trainings can really create good storytelling. We all have interesting stories to tell. We just have to sell them better. But that's not easy. No. And we're still learning. That's. I'm also still learning. I'm far from perfect, but we can keep improving. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Try to do better. Also with posters, I think there are some movements in changing the poster style, but a lot of people are against that as well, having these high, like large titles and less text. Some people do it, it grabs attention. Some people hate those posters. Yeah, it's fighting against the existing
Right.
dogmas is very challenging, but it has to be done. It creates discussion and it creates a better, yeah,
Thanks so
better
much.
posts, better communication, I think. Yeah. And less is more as well for posts.
Thank you.
We can keep talking, I think it's interesting topic. Yeah.
No, it is very interesting, and I think it's very helpful as well. And also, I asked that question as well because I think for people who couldn't make it and who are gonna watch back the recording, it's gonna be very helpful because I know, like in our lab group at least, people right now are working on like a project that has that they need to make like PowerPoint. It's like a research thing. So yeah, so I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah. I think so this if no one else has any questions, I think I'm gonna stop the recording. That's okay. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now. Stop recording. Stop.